Good morning and welcome to another 1.5 hours of sensibility. I am your host, Jen Jackson, and we have a great show planned for you today. Today's show is going to be especially enjoyable for me because I have two of my favorite activists and mentors here. It's quite a pleasure to have these two. First, we have Miss Shaleen Title. She is the Speakers Bureau Director for Law Enforcement Against Prohibition, and she is here to discuss the war on drugs and share with us some of the new developments that LEAP has in the works. So that's going to be a lot of fun. And next, we have YouTube legend I Am Hemp 420. Very excited to have him here. As a matter of fact, I petitioned pretty hard to get his attention. So I wrote him about a dozen emails and I basically harassed him until he answered me. And then I twisted his arm to come on the show. So, yeah, I'm really looking forward to you being able to hear from him too. You may also know him as I Am Hoser Hemp 420 or Hoser Legalized 420. He has 3 videos on YouTube. But he is here to share with us his motivation on becoming an activist and getting involved in the movement to legalize cannabis. So, without further ado, let's get right into it and let's bring Shaleen on. She's been waiting very patiently.
Shaleen, are you with us?
I'm here.
Wonderful. I would like to thank you for taking your afternoon and spending some time with us today.
Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. Now, Shaleen, I covered your bio a little bit, but why don't you go ahead and give our listeners a little bit of personal history on yourself?
Sure. I first got interested in drug policy almost 10 years ago when I was a sophomore at the University of Illinois, and I went to see a talk. And it was a woman that has multiple sclerosis. Her name is Julie Falco, and she's still one of the primary patient activists in Illinois. And she talked about how she had been diagnosed while she was in college, and she had gone through every pharmaceutical, and they didn't work. They were expensive. They gave her side effects, and she couldn't get access to her medicine. And that was kind of my first glimpse into the drug war, and I couldn't believe it. So my friends and I, we co-founded a chapter of Students for Sensible Drug Policy. And at that time, chapters were cropping up all over the country. And I thought it would just be an extracurricular thing at the time. I was an accounting major. But I learned a lot about the drug laws and how to participate in the political process from being involved in SSDP. And when I went on to law school, I stayed really involved in drug policy in Illinois and also learning about prohibition in general. And then when I graduated, I took a brief detour into tax law, and then I joined law enforcement against prohibition, where I'm a full-time activist. I've been here for 2 years, and I recruit, train, and manage volunteer law enforcement agents who are speaking out about the damaging effects of prohibition and the need for a change in our policy.
Wonderful. And that is such an important role. LEAP is an amazing group. I know that I've mentioned them a few times on the show, and I encourage everyone to go take a look at them because it's really neat to see them out there delivering such a credible message. Firsthand experience, you don't get any more accurate or credible than that. Yeah. In your opinion, what is the most crippling side effect of the war on drugs? Because there's so many angles that you can look at it from, whether you're looking at the patient's right to medicine or you're looking at it as a civil rights issue. We even have the environmental benefits coming into play. There's just, it's amazing. But from your perspective, what do you think is the most crippling side effect?
Well, I think you're absolutely right that no matter what it is that outrages you, if it's a moral issue or a waste of money or a terrible effect on the environment, you're probably going to find it with the drug war. For me personally, it's really crippling to society, and that's a very accurate term for it, that we are rounding up people by the millions, and mostly poor people of color, and locking them up, and the rate continues to increase exponentially. And then when they get out, they're labeled as felons, and they can be legally discriminated against now because they're felons. And so in terms of jobs, housing, voting, even being on juries, they're basically locked out of society. And so you have this underclass of people that can be discriminated against. And it's been going on for so long. It's crippling the society. And the absolute craziest part is that what we're doing with this drug war doesn't even reduce drug use or drug sales or crime associated with drugs. It makes those problems worse. So for me, that's the biggest thing.
Yeah, and yeah, I can see, and I think anyone else can as well, when they take a look at the material, how it makes it worse, creating another unregulated market where in order for drug dealers and the drug cartel to do business, they have to pretty much operate on a violence-based model as opposed to a legal-based model, because if they run into a discrepancy, of course, they can't take it to court. They, take it to, personal violence, trying to resolve it, in that respect. But in addition to that, it cripples our society. It not only makes, the bad people more wealthy, but it cripples the good people in the respect that we are, number one, locking up nonviolent offenders while we're unable to house violent offenders such as rapists and murderers. And we're focusing our law enforcement's attention on, again, nonviolent offenders, people who are, really just seeking alternative relief for medical issues, alternatives.
That's exactly right. And that's why a lot of people choose to join LEAP, a lot of the law enforcement professionals who don't necessarily know a lot about drug users, and they definitely don't condone the use of drugs. But it's just like you said, that prohibition puts us into this situation where violence and criminal enrichment are a natural consequence. And that's not even unique to this drug war. That has been the situation every time that prohibition has been used as a method. It has ended up in people continuing to use that substance and violence and criminal enrichment for gangs and cartels.
Right. It's sad. And then on top of it, you have to look at what it does to a family, where you can actually create a welfare family from, a completely self-sufficient family if you're taking one of the head of the household out of the picture and putting them in jail for using a substance. There's so many angles to which this needs to be examined. So I guess my question to you would be, in having observed that, what measures do you feel should be taken that could improve upon the situation and perhaps minimize the collateral damage directly associated with prohibition?
Well, I think that right now 100% of the approach that we're taking is police and enforcement and the criminal justice system, when really that's just one tiny piece of how drugs should be looked at. Because, like you said, sometimes drugs are just being used by someone who's trying to find relief or self-medicate. Maybe it's not causing them a problem. And then other times it's an addiction problem. And what we need for people is to use education and prevention and treatment. And a good example of that is to look at cigarettes. We've seen a 40% reduction in tobacco use over the past couple of decades, and we did that without locking up one person. It was all a prevention and education model, and those methods of using advertising restrictions and controlling the place and manner where a person can use cigarettes, that's control that you don't have when you have a prohibition. And so we get these excellent results across all socioeconomic lines when we're able to use all these different tools at our disposal. And we still let people who are using the drug, tobacco in this case, be functioning, contributing members of society. So you still have that family unit there. You haven't lost the head of household because he's in prison or she's in prison. And so I think that any step that we can take in that direction of taking back control over the substance and using a public health approach to help people if they need help is a measure that would improve our current situation.
Yeah, that sounds like logical thinking. And, through past track record, it proves true. Tell us about some of the countries that are embracing more sensible and compassionate drug laws. What models are they employing, and what results are they seeing?
So what LEAP suggests is doing away with prohibition altogether and replacing it with a completely regulatory and non-criminal approach, and that approach would be completely legal. That's what we're recommending. And we haven't seen any country do that yet, but we have seen some countries take steps in the right direction, and two of those are Portugal and Switzerland. In Portugal, they had a huge drug problem, and so in 2001, they decriminalized all drugs, and they focused anti-drug efforts on public health and safety, so that if a person is using drugs, they get a citation similar to a traffic ticket, and then they will see a panel that decides if they need treatment or any other kind of support. And we have a lot of data on that now, since that was 10 years ago. And what is found, the Cato Institute and several others have done studies on this, they found that there was no cost whatsoever, even if you don't include the benefits of the health improvements that have come as a result. It's been completely a shift from putting funding into criminal justice and enforcement into the public health approach. And the results have been amazing.